Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today I got a real treat for you. His name is Tom Wachholder, and he is the Public Works Director for the city of Wenatchee in beautiful Washington State. Tom, say what's up to everybody.
Hey, welcome. Thanks, Joseph. Appreciate it. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Sure thing. Sure thing. So, Tom, you're the Public Works Director, city of Wenatchee in Washington. Give us kind of the lay of the land, like population, maybe the square mileage, just to kind of get people to know what Wenatchee looks like.
Yeah. So Wenatchee is located in north central Washington and Washington State. So we're approximately middle of the state, and population wise, about 36,000 population. Largest city in Chelan County. And we border the Columbia River, so there's a lot of recreational opportunity, not only with the river, but we're also close proximity to the Cascade Mountains. So there's lots of river-related recreational opportunities, as well as skiing in the winter, and so a lot of cool stuff to do here in Wenatchee.
Okay.
And Wenatchee it's known for its fruit industry, so there's a lot of agricultural related to apples and pears and cherries.
Okay. I didn't know that. Good stuff. So you're the Public Works Director. Give us an example, just so we can get a little bit of what you do from day to day. Give us a random Tuesday from the time you get to the office to the time you leave the office. What's Tom doing all day?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think initially, of course, out of the gate, before I even get to the office, I take a glance at email to make sure there's nothing red hot before the day starts. Usually if there's some kind of emergency or catastrophe that happens after hours, I'll be notified, whether it's text or a phone call. So that's not all that common, but it does happen. Out of the gate, just getting into the office, I'm just going to double check my priority list for the week. I try to set priorities the week prior, and given that it would be a Tuesday, just take a quick glance at those to make sure I'm staying on top of things and make sure I'm meeting deadlines and buy wins and such. Other than that, just check it first thing, of course, also is just looking at my calendar, just live by that Outlook calendar. So if it's a Tuesday, there's several meetings of sorts, whether it's a finance committee meeting with the council or public services committee meeting with the council. And so just mentally preparing for that. And we do weekly public works leadership team meetings, so making sure I'm prepared for those, and just facilitate weekly one-on-ones with my 4 direct reports. So again, just a lot of meeting preparation and just making sure that I'm up to speed on things before I get into the meat of the day. And it depends. I mean, we're currently the team is delivering a mega project at the moment that has a lot of right-of-way, not only acquisition, but relocation, so highly sensitive matters related to the capital project delivery. And so we've been, having to facilitate some tough conversations with folks. And so just checking in too with staff on that project in particular to make sure there's no red hot items I got to keep the city administrator or mayor apprised of.
Okay. There's a couple follow-up questions I have from that. So there's priority list. I like a guy who likes lists. I like lists myself. Are you writing these down on a legal pad? Or are these in like Notion, some unique software? Like, where does Tom put his list down? And then also, like, how do you prioritize your list? Like, do you have a certain set of check marks you put next to it, and tabs and smiley faces and sad faces? Like, take us on the inside of Tom's list, methodology.
That's great, Joseph. So honestly, what I do is I do a weekly summary email to my boss, the city administrator, every Friday afternoon or whatever time allows, usually during the last day of the week. And so in that email, high level major tasks completed. And quite frankly, this is not necessarily it's twofold. One, it does keep my boss apprised of things. Now, granted, she doesn't request a weekly breakdown of my tasks and duties and stuff, or tasks completed rather, but it's for kind of just tracking myself. And then part of that email, I list out weekly priorities. So the priorities the following week. And then I also have a kind of list of ongoing items that I'm working on that aren't necessarily next week's priority, but they're more ongoing. And that's just a way to keep track. And how I prioritize the list. So I do an annual work plan. And so I just making sure that these that these priorities are aligned with that annual work plan. And quite frankly, a lot of the priorities too are attending certain meetings that are pre-scheduled. But if I got items I got to follow up on, I make sure I write them down so I don't miss them. Because if I'm not organized, I'll miss items. So I'm human. I'm certainly not perfect
Likewise.
in that regard.
Yeah. All right. Tell me about urgency versus importance. Which one, takes the cake on the list? Something you got to get done right away, or something that's really, really, really important?
Interesting question. That certainly varies. I mean, if there's public safety component to it, life safety matters. That is definitely an urgency that takes precedent. For example, we had a pretty substantial sewer force main break that occurred a couple months ago, and I assisted the team by just contacting, the large customers in that basin. So a couple of fruit packing warehouses, school district, PUD, which is the public utility district. So stuff like that. So if there's those types of life safety components, they're going to take priority one for sure. And yeah, right now it's with the mega project I mentioned. The title of that project is called Confluence Parkway. So if there's any hot items tied to that rises to the top. But just recently we had to negotiate several agreements with BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway Company. And so a lot of those time sensitive matters would rise to the top. So that's certainly the urgent list, the urgency portion of it. In terms of importance, how does that play into it? I mean, I would say the important stuff is always listed at the bottom of, whether it's ongoing. Certainly, I don't try to put anything on there that doesn't need my attention, but sometimes I'll put it on there just as a placeholder for information only. But yeah, the important stuff definitely is cycled up on the priority list as needed.
And this mega project, it sounds pretty juicy. Give us kind of if you can, give us the details and the parameters.
Yeah.
What's going on, and then what constitutes a mega project versus like a regular capital improvement project?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, this is just my definition of the mega project. It's multiple phases. The total project is about $335 million. It's a progressive design build project. It's 4 phases, so only the first phase is funded at this point, but it's still about $130 million project, phase 1. And so what this is ultimately, when it's complete, it's going to provide additional ingress and egress for the city of Wenatchee. We're confined by, again, the mountains I mentioned earlier. So we're confined by the mountains to the west and the Columbia River to the east. And so there's 2 bridges that you have to get over to get out of town. And so those are both bottlenecks, and we are prone to wildfires in this area. And so there's an emergency management component to this project, but also just general congestion relief of our state route 285 that comes into town. So this is just a redundant corridor that's being built. Again, multiple phases. The first phase, what it does is it provides an overpass to the railroad and an underpass to the same railroad. So it's 2 grade separations. And then the subsequent phasing would be an additional bridge across the Wenatchee River. But again, just the first phase is funded right now, funded in part with a federal infra grant at about $92 million, and the remainder is a state appropriation, a Move Ahead Washington grant. So. Wow. Yeah, so that's what's going on right now. We have a design builder that they've been under contract for some time. Before I started at the city of Wenatchee, I've been here since July of 24. And again, I just want to give a shout out to our city engineer, Jake Lewing. He's managing this project and doing a fantastic job with it. And they're breaking ground actually this month on that first phase.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. The railroad, they're going to be constructing what's called a shoe fly. So they're going to be building a temporary bypass for the railroad so they can construct an underpass under the railroad, the existing railroad that has to maintain, normal everyday usage of the railroad during the construction project.
A shoe fly. That's a new term for me.
Yeah, it's just basically a temporary bypass for rail cars.
Okay. You also talked about the Public Works leadership meetings. It's intriguing because, again, when I hear people leaders getting together and having meetings. Like, is this more of like a professional development meeting, or is this the leaders in public works talking about what's happening within the city of Wenatchee?
This is, yeah, I'm glad you asked. So the Public Works Department is comprised of three primary divisions. We have operations, utilities, and engineering. We have 80 FTE in Public Works Department as a whole. And our Public Works leadership teams, there's a couple little subgroups to that. So we have what I'll start off with, the senior leadership team, which is myself, our admin assistant, and our 3 division deputy directors. So that's kind of our senior leadership team. And we meet monthly. And what we do in those monthly meetings, we discuss as a group, what is the highest priority of the department collectively that we need to discuss, whether it's, space needs at our public services center where all of our operations are. We have a couple private development projects that are going on downtown that are large and have some impact to the transportation system, and what are some other topics. So right now we're going through a visioning workshop in public works. So we're going through, we're establishing a purpose statement, a vision, and going through some goal setting. And so I'll ask for feedback from the team on how those workshops are going. We've done 2 so far. And that's just a really kind of just the senior public works leadership team where the group, we just get together, and there's strong emotional intelligence, high amounts of psychological safety. So we ask tough questions, and we're not afraid to push one another. And that's just how we learn. And then the other leadership team meetings we have, so that's once a month. Then the other 2 weeks of the month we meet with managers and just the managers. So there's about 8 of us, so that includes the deputy directors and the managers. And then once a month we meet as managers and supervisors. It's about 15 of us. And so we go through, we don't necessarily go through general updates. We provide those ahead of time. So we really want to get into the meat of the meeting of, okay, what are you stuck on? What do you need resources with? And just how can we help move their priorities along? And then we have a leadership video component to it, kind of talk, leadership. But most importantly, I failed to mention, my favorite part about these leadership teams is that we celebrate the wins. So we have a shout outs and recent wins section of each leadership team. So we go around the room and folks give shout outs to their peers, their team. And so it's good stuff.
Okay. I like it. I don't hear that too many cities do that. So it's pretty cool that you're intentional about getting together, celebrating wins, and also doing a little bit of development on that. Mm-hmm. So let's dive into the backstory, the lore of Tom Wachholder. Give us your career path, from high school leading up to today.
Okay. No, sounds good. I'm originally from Wisconsin, so I'm a transplant to Washington State.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's right. Wisconsin. Cheesehead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I graduated high school, and it's funny, I first got into public works. I was 17 when I graduated high school, and I was just looking for a summer job. And a friend of mine was like, hey, the village of Pleasant Prairie, they hire high school kids to mow parks in the summertime. And I was like, okay. So I went online, or I might even went by Village Hall and picked up a paper application. I don't remember. Nonetheless, I filled out an application. I went to drop it off, and they said, oh, I'm like, here's my application for seasonal employment. And they said, well, is this for parks or streets? And being 17, I'm like, I think it's streets. Yeah, streets. So I applied for streets thinking I was going to be mowing lawns. So I interviewed, I got the job. Well, I wasn't mowing lawns. I was on the crack sealer. So they hired summer seasonals to crack seal in the hot, humid environment of Wisconsin. So yeah. So I was, So my first experience in public works was, running the crack sealer. That was, and so I went to college. I originally was a electrical engineer major. My majors, I changed majors a number of times, electrical engineering, civil engineering, computer science. And I remember when I was in computer science, there was a subset of that, GIS, Geographic Information Systems. And it wasn't widely popular at the time, but I really kind of gravitated towards that. And so the GIS component was actually in the geography department. So my undergrad is in geography, and I got a GIS certificate. And then I was, after college, I was hired on full time as just a maintenance tech in Wisconsin that had a little bit of a GIS component to it. And I wasn't there too long, and I decided to to apply to graduate school. And so I got accepted at Central Washington University in Ellensburg at their resource management grad program. And I applied there, got accepted, and I got an assistantship. So I got a tuition waiver, and they basically paid me to go to grad school. So I took the opportunity and moved out west. And that was, oh geez, it was over 15, 16 years ago now. And yeah, so I went to graduate school at the resource management master's of science program, and I focused on water quality. I got out of graduate school and again had some odd jobs. So one thing that's fairly unique and probably uncharacteristic is that when I was 18, kind of going backwards a little bit, when I was at the Village of Pleasant Prairie Public Works, I worked there in the summers while I went to undergrad. And when I turned 18, my supervisor at the time was like, "Hey, how would you like to get your commercial driver's license?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah, that sounds fun." So yeah. So when I was 18, I got my commercial driver's license. And so when I was on summer break, even in undergrad, they put me in a plow truck. And so I was plowing snow as a 18-year-old college student on winter break. And so I got some experience there, but it really paid off because when I got out of graduate school, it's, 2011, and it was hard to find a job at the time, but I got picked up on a seasonal employment with the National Park Service down at Point Reyes National Seashore, working on the road crew.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that the DOT was hiring at the time for just winter seasonal snowplow drivers. And again, I'm in survival mode after grad school, just trying to work and make money to eat and pay rent. And so I got hired on Washington State Department of Transportation, and I plowed snow on the mountain passes up here in Washington on Blewett Pass for 3 seasons and 1 season on Stevens Pass, and which was really kind of an adrenaline rush. I mean, Stevens Pass, they could get 400, 500, 600, 600 inches of snow a year, and avalanche danger and all that stuff. And finally landed a full-time job in my career path in public works, in particular water quality, with the city of East Wenatchee, and that was in 2015 or so. And so I got hired on to manage their stormwater program. So it was aligned with my water quality work in graduate school, but nonetheless, I was still in public works. It's something I've always enjoyed. And it was nice getting into a leadership role, because come to find out, like, it's one thing to manage projects and manage a program, but what I really enjoy the most about public works is just managing a team and setting them up for success and supporting the team best I can. And so I really enjoyed that role at the city of East Wenatchee. I did that for about 3 years, and then my boss, the public works director at the time, retired, and the mayor at the time did a reorganization. And basically, the city of East Wenatchee doesn't have full utilities; they just had a street department. And so the public works director at that time, right when he was retiring, the mayor decided to do a reorg and kind of pull the street department out of public works. And so, and my director retired at the time, I applied for his job, and I got appointed to it, and it was converted to project development manager. So I oversaw basically their engineering portion of the city, which was all consultants, and then I had the stormwater program as well. So that job was more project delivery, less so much leadership, but it definitely got me a lot of experience just delivering capital projects. And I did that for over 3 years, and then Leavenworth, Washington had a public works director position open, and I applied and got that job. So that was a full public works department in city of Leavenworth here. It's actually a smaller community than East Wenatchee, but their public works department was full utilities. They had a surface water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant. So the public works department was over twice the size. So East Wenatchee was about 9, 10 total public works. Leavenworth's about 32 full-time equivalent in public works. So yeah, so I was up there for just over 3 years, and then the city of Wenatchee position opened up last year, and I applied and was appointed public works director here. And like I said, wow, there's 80 FTE total in the city of Wenatchee, and full scale utilities, water, sewer, storm. So
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Those guys at your first job, they did a really good job at getting you into the industry. A lot of people can take notes. Just grabbing kids out of high school, getting them a
Yeah,
CDL, like that's huge. A CDL,
I
getting them,
know.
on the street
I
side.
know, I know, I know. Not a lot of people, not a lot of people know, but I still have my commercial driver's license. Obviously, I don't use it anymore, but it's something that I got when I was 18, and I just renew it when I renew my driver's license. So yeah,
Yeah. And then you said Point Reyes. Point Reyes, that's in California, correct?
correct. Yeah, just north of
Yeah.
San Francisco. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've spent plenty of time in Point Reyes, and good vibes up there.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
Yeah.
it was a very small, uh, duration wise, it was a short part of my career, but I mean it's how I met my wife down there. So and she's up here in Washington. We've been married for not almost 9 years. So yeah, yeah,
Nice, nice. They have the cheese out there in Point Reyes. That's what it was. The cheese.
yeah. That does ring a bell. I was only there for about 5 months. So yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay. All right. So let's say a youngster is interviewing you and they ask you, Tom, like, what's the main skill set they should pick up to be successful as a public works director? What would that skill set be?
Mm, I would have to say building relationships. And what I mean by that in particular is building strong relationships. I mean, just that's so important in this role, both internally and externally, because you're going to have, whether it's staff, members of the team, or folks from a different department, and certainly outside stakeholders. There's always opportunity to be able to communicate and work through tough conversations. And if you have a good working relationship with somebody, it just makes it smoother. Yeah. So one thing I would tell someone, younger person that was interested, and I said, hey, the tendency is the path of least resistance is to avoid those tough conversations. But if you're going to have, friction or a tough working relationship with somebody, my advice is just to spend the extra effort to build a better relationship with the folks that are going to be create
Yeah.
more friction, or you're going to just not get along with the best. It's like, don't
Yeah.
avoid them. Yeah. So yeah.
You in your when you're talking about your career path, you spoke on the different types of public works departments, and I've noticed this around the country that there's different assignments that public works departments have. Some have water, some don't have
Mhm.
water, some have streets, some don't have parks and rec, some have all of them. Some don't have storms. So would you
Mhm.
say, at different cities, I'm not asking about like the pay. Like, let's say you have a smaller city, but that city has more verticals under public works versus a bigger city and it has less. Like, what's the difference in just the workload? And then like how it's, I guess because you've experienced both. What's the difference in
Mm.
having a small city with a lot of responsibility versus a bigger city with a little responsibility?
Mm. Yeah, that's a interesting question. So with having more areas underneath you, I mean, there's definitely higher risk. I mean, with my East Wenatchee Leavenworth example, I mean, East Wenatchee, they don't have municipal water or sewer, but Leavenworth, they had municipal water and sewer. They even had parks too. So Leavenworth had traditional public works, utilities, and parks. And what comes with that is just having to have a more general understanding of every discipline of public works, because it's impossible as a director to be an expert in every single field. And so it's really important just to learn from the operators and learn from the subject matter experts that you have on staff. But the biggest difference again is just being able to, I mean, you just inherently have to trust your team more and get to the point where you can trust them. And if you don't, I mean, just ask earnest questions and try to find out what you need to trust them more. And yeah, it definitely takes a little bit more to get there. And what I mean by that is just, again, learning, get rolling up your sleeves and just not necessarily doing the work, but shadowing the team and asking them what challenges they have, what do they need to succeed. I mean, just asking them like, what does great look like, and try to just really see it from their perspective. But also have an understanding too that the more disciplines you have, the more risk there is. So with like having water and sewer, it's like, are we being proactive with replacing mainline sewer and mainline water? Do we have a valve exercising program? So just having that understanding too, to ask those questions about, how proactive are we being right now, I think is also important. Because I mean, the more proactive you are, of course, the less, the better you can mitigate risk in the future. Because I mean, there's been times where I've been part of, we have significant water main breaks, and the valves you need to isolate that break are not turning, so you have to go expand in the system and have more widespread outages. So it just is important to have a general understanding enough to ask those questions, like, hey, are we being proactive? Do we have preventive maintenance programs in place? So that's the biggest difference of having multiple disciplines, I think.
Sure. Okay. It's like having more children. I have 3 now, and now it's like more risk out there versus when I just had 1.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I got 2 kiddos myself, so
Yeah, you get it. You get it. The city of Wenatchee. Give us a sense of you as a director, kind of like what the what the scope is, and then how you. I'm trying to phrase this the best way. Let's go ahead and go into the story. So story time. I need a story from Tom when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to fix it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Story time. A couple come to mind. Let's see. I'll do the most recent one here at the city of Wenatchee. Well, one of the recent ones. So at the first of the year, we've had a couple emergencies. The first one back in January, we had a 12-inch sewer force main break, which is a significant sewer force main, and it served a large industrial commercial area of Wenatchee, and one of the customers is a fruit packing warehouse and a large fruit ag producing fruit company. And they pack year round, and so when they do go through their packing exercises and workflows, they have to flush and use a lot of wash water, so they discharge a lot of wastewater. And this whole area, because it was a force main, this whole basin is served by a lift station. And so when the force main broke, we did not have a real easy way to bypass pump. We'd have to lay 7,000 feet of ground laid pipe in order to bypass this area. And also what we had working against us was this sewer force main was 20 feet deep. And so we had to utilize, of course, the mayor declared an emergency, and we had contractors that mobilized right away. But what was really cool and impressive is that our crew, utilizing our 3 sewer vacuums and mutual aid from the Douglas County Sewer District, we had 4 sewer vacuums, and we shuttled wastewater 36 hours straight out of the lift station because we had no way to bypass pump it. And so the sewer force main, it was fixed after about 40 hours of excavating. And so it was a major issue. And that was I gave an example of this particular one a moment ago where I jumped in and helped with contacting the large users in the area. So the fruit company, the public utility district that has about 900 employees in their headquarters, and the school district, we asked them to voluntarily cut back on wastewater discharge as much as possible. We couldn't, we didn't make it mandatory. So there was good public relations opportunity there, especially with those large customers and working with their senior leadership team. And a couple lessons learned that came out of that was, having some kind of predetermined, almost like mutual aid plans if we need Vector trucks. And of course, our partner agencies were super helpful, and it was really good, and everything went really smoothly. And then also, like, communications plans we had in place went pretty smoothly. But again, some of those, come to mind lessons learned is Chelan County Emergency Management. They could have played a role with assisting with messaging, and we could have engaged them sooner in the process. And these are, these of course, at the end of the day, it was very successful, but these were kind of the nitpicky lessons learned that kind of came out of it, when we did an after action review. And yeah, other than that, I can't really think of much else that rises to the surface. But, shout out to our fleet division. I mean, we had Vector trucks run for that long without a breakdown. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts on those trucks. So.
Sure. I remember the question I was going to ask, kind of like the bat line or that red phone, that internally, who does Tom reach out to, kind of like, hey, we need you for this, we need you for that. Who's like that internal, like, person you can lean on for help in regards to public works?
I would say any
department.
Yeah. Internally inside public works, I would reach out to the respective deputy director for their division. Like all three, I'm very fortunate. The three deputy directors we have here at the city, our deputy director of utilities, deputy director of operations, and city engineer are all three super squared away and do their jobs well. So if there's ever an issue that comes across my desk that they're not already aware of, I'm fortunate that I just pick up the phone and all three of them would answer anytime, 24/7 if there's a problem.
Cool.
And then reverse up the chain of command, I notify the city administrator directly if there's anything that the red phone rings per se, as you say.
Yeah. How does Tom continue to get better and better year after year? I know you've been at this position for so less than a year, but you've been in the game, in the industry for a long time. How do you what do you do intentionally to keep putting new information in your brain to be able to operate more efficiently?
Yes. So what I like to do is, having two young kids, it's hard to find discretionary time a lot of the time, but I do really enjoy reading leadership books. That is something that I like to do. Leadership podcasts. I listen to leadership podcasts. And one thing that's I'm really fortunate to capitalize on here at the city of Wenatchee is my boss encouraged me to take advantage of this opportunity. But I meet with a leadership coach once a month, and wow. That is just a resource for me to get better. And that is one thing that I really strive. And I ask myself, and I ask my direct reports and my boss for feedback monthly. So I meet weekly with my direct reports, and then once a month, there's a more intentional feedback, giving and receiving feedback in those meetings. So I just put it out there, and they know ahead of time because I have an agenda and the questions ahead of time. But it's like I ask specifically, what can I do better? How can I better serve you? How can I better the department? So I really appreciate feedback. Is a good way for me to improve, and I do my best to encourage it, and to the point where I don't want anyone to feel that I'm going to judge them if they give me feedback. Like I try to, perhaps it's over the top, but I'm just like I need the feedback, and when folks give it to me, I really appreciate it because that's how I get better.
Yeah,
I take it personal. Like I want it in earnest. If you see me something I could do better, please tell me, because I'm only one perspective here. So yeah.
As you spoke about the leadership coach, I started doing the calculations behind it. Okay, let's say you guys had a leadership coach on part-time retainer, cost the city, let's say $20,000-$30,000 a year. The ROI on having a leadership coach is through the roof. Like there's so much positive ROI on that. Like it makes you think, why doesn't every city do that? Find the best local leadership coach and say, hey, we want 12, 15 hours a week from you. We have these leaders on our staff, and they want to be able to have a 45-minute phone call with you once a week or twice a month or whatever. And like, it's kind of a no-brainer. So tell us, again, you don't have to talk about money, but just the leadership coach, how it's structured, and then like kind of what the tempo is, and then what some of the things that you might have gained from it.
Yeah. No, that's great. So currently the tempo at 90-minute sessions, and they're about monthly, just given the circumstances and just scheduling. Sometimes I have just kind of one-off, kind of like, hey, I got this situation here. What are your thoughts? Like, how would this is my approach. What do you think? And she'll give me feedback on that. And kind of the big picture goal with my leadership coach is just I'm facilitating a visioning workshop with the Public Works Department right now, and she's been assisting me with kind of framing. Like I'll put together like my agenda for. We've done 2 workshops, and I've kind of bounced ideas off her. But that's my overall kind of goal with the leadership coach, is to get through a visioning workshop where we have an established mission or purpose, clear vision, and for the 5-year horizon, set of goals, and then we'll start working towards objectives as a department.
Okay.
So she's helping me kind of with the strategic planning piece of the department, but also too, like I said, the one-off stuff that comes up. So a great resource, by the way, and I think there's great value in it. And even just 90-minute sessions once a month there's value.
100%. Oh yeah, for sure. All right. You said you like books. I need a leadership book recommendation and then a leadership podcast recommendation, besides the Public Works podcast, of course.
Let's see. Oh boy. Leadership book recommendation. The one that comes to mind out of the gate is probably Growth Mindset, Carol Dweck, for a leadership book. And that's all that applies to work, life, kids. It's a great book. And then leadership podcast, probably Coaching for Leaders. Dave Stachowiak comes to mind.
Coaching for Leaders. All right, thanks.
And then followed up. There's a tie for that one. There's also the Jocko Willink podcast.
Jocko. I met Jocko at the Seattle airport years ago. Like,
oh really?
Jocko. Yeah, he's like short. I shook his hand. I'm like, oh, I read your books, dude. He's like,
yeah,
cool.
No, I got his books too. Yeah, Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leadership, Leadership Strategy and Tactics. Those are good books too.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, so let's talk misconceptions. Let's say we asked your wife's best friend, like, what does Tom do all day, every day? What would her best friend get wrong in answering that question?
Yeah, what comes to mind there is Tom just tells people what to do. Like, oh, he's a director, he tells people what to do. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. And if we had a perfect department, and like I said, we've gone through a strategic plan and we had all our goals in place, and everyone from top all the way to the bottom knew what we were working towards. Everyone, people, they wouldn't, my goal is not to have people be told what to do. They know, based on whether it's work plans, they know that everything they do is aligned back to the overall goals of the department. So I think that's a misconception. I just sit around, I tell people what to do. It would be, having a department of 80 employees, that would get exhausting pretty quickly. So yeah, getting folks empowered to make those decisions, and just more or less, come to me and say, hey, I intend to do this. Like, okay, is it aligned with, goals in your work plan? Then go for it. You don't need me. It's more the question that I would ask is, okay, what do you need for me to succeed? What resources do you need? So I think a lot of that, sure, there are times, I think there's a difference between telling people what to do and making decisions. I want to be clear about that. But yeah, I think, oh, you're a director, so you must sit there and just tell people what to do all day is what comes to mind. But no, it's trying to facilitate and foster a team that's self-sustaining and autonomous. Yeah. But aligned, of course, with the big picture.
Gotcha. Speaking of team, we have our best and brightest focused on the aging infrastructure of our utilities, but I like to focus on the aging workforce. I'm sure you have this, I wouldn't say problem, but this dichotomy internally where a lot of your best technicians are staring down retirement. And it can sometimes be tough to get the younger, newer generation to get in and get competent and retain them. So tell us what you've done or what you've seen that's been done that's worked to be able to hire that new talent, that 18-year-old Tom who got his CDL and he's got a good head and his shoulders, to find people like that and then get them into the city and keep them.
Yeah. So what we do here, we're certainly, working on recruitment I know will be part of our strategic goals. One thing that we do now is we hire interns both in engineering and GIS. we've been successful. In fact, we just hired a GIS tech that came up through our GIS internship program.
Oh,
So,
okay. Cool.
we've been, so I would call that a success. One thing that I've seen that we don't do here in Wenatchee, but I've seen or heard of rather, is, kind of like an apprenticeship type program where you bring somebody in at like a maintenance tech. If there's like 1, 2, 3, and 4, you bring them in as a 1, and it's like, hey, here you can kind of learn the skills and kind of progressively move up through the organization. But it's a very much a entry level type position, and that I've heard is folks having success with that. One thing that's tough with Wenatchee is, the housing market here it's tough to get into. There's, it's expensive. It's a high cost of living area. And so how do we mitigate that is a tough one, especially when I was at the city of Leavenworth in particular. That's a really tough housing market there. And, before I left, they were entertaining ideas of like, okay, do we even have city housing just to give folks in the area?
Okay. I like
it's
it.
that tight, especially for maintenance technicians and entry-level operators. It's hard to find affordable, attainable housing up there for folks on that income. So I think, bolstering our internship program and exploring ways to, even find a way to soften prerequisites for some of our utility positions. So, for example, our water utility worker, they require a water distribution manager 1 just to apply, and that's something certainly they can learn and attain on the job. So how do we explore that and maybe make that kind of like within 3 years, or are there opportunities there? So that's part of that's part of our kind of visioning process, where we're going to explore that, because we are seeing challenges with hiring those technician level positions that have those prerequisites.
Yeah. I love, and I'd love to be able to just powwow that concept of the housing for public employees with economist or director, whoever, because most of the cities that I know, like that are in a metropolitan area, the workers don't live in that city. They have to commute from sometimes 30, 45. I remember there's a guy commuting 1 hour and 35 minutes from his home to the city of San Francisco. And granted, that's San Francisco, but still, like the quality of life of a tech just tanks, when he's spending three hours plus on the road. Versus if he could have even just a room, to sleep in at night, and not have to go home every day. So I feel like that should be something a lot of cities should plan for. But again, like it's going to cost something, and who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, the financial component is always a challenge.
Yeah. Okay, let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard. This billboard is in the most trafficked area of Wenatchee. What ask of your community in regards to public works would you put on this billboard?
Yeah, what comes to mind there is just asking for patience and grace, because whether it's a construction project or an emergency in public works, we definitely understand the impacts, and just trying to get folks to give us a little bit of grace. We are working very hard, and sometimes, like projects, for example, they take years to plan, and especially in today's age, with escalation in construction and material pricing, like there's budgetary challenges. And so when folks see, things projects get delayed, or projects take longer than they anticipate, there's also unforeseen conditions. So anything in public works related, I just would say, have some patience and understanding, and don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. Like it's okay to be curious, and I encourage folks to be curious, and just try to assume positive intent the best you can, because I know a lot of times public works employees, it's quite the opposite. People assume negative intent, and they get the wrath of the result of that. So, and it's tough.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tom, I always like to leave a space on the show for you to thank mentors that mentored you along your journey. And then also, I want you to give a word of inspiration and motivation to fellow public works director counterparts across the country.
Yes, mentors. I'd have to say, when I was at the city of East Wenatchee, we hired a police chief, Rick Johnson. He's still the police chief over there, and he really introduced me to real leadership. In fact, he introduced me to Jocko Willink and his leadership books, and he was a really good sounding board, and still is a good leader. In fact, I still talk to him if I have anything tough going on, and he's always there to give me some advice and be there for me. So I really appreciate his mentorship over the last almost 10 years now. So yeah, and kind of a leadership or inspirational message, I would say nobody expects you to be perfect. Don't be afraid to fail. That's how we learn. And just be humble. Like humility I feel is the number one leadership trait. And no one expects you to be perfect, and it's okay to say I don't know, ask questions, and with the failure piece too, I mean, those are learning opportunities. I mean, failing, sure, it's perceived as like, oh, you didn't succeed. Well, no, there's always some good that comes out of it. So there's learning opportunities from failing. So yeah, don't be afraid to fail and be humble.
Okay, I like it. All right, let's say I'm coming to town. I'm coming to Wenatchee, and I text you ahead of time. I say, Tom, where can I go to get the best burger in town? Where are you sending me?
Easy's. That's easy.
Okay.
Yep, easy. Okay. Easy apostrophe S. Yeah.
I like it. Easy as it is. Easy does it. Yeah. Well, Tom, thanks for hopping on the podcast today. Thanks for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Tom, any final words before we get out of here?
No, I just want to say thank you, Joseph. I appreciate you reaching out. This was fun, and yeah, happy to share my story.
Sweet. Well, Tom, once again, thanks for hopping on. This has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for listening.